Brodie has blessed us with yet another Twitter take. This dude is just sitting at home, just rattling off Twitter takes.
Spewing out the Twitter takes.
So this one says, when the commentators continue to root and cheer on players' shot and then put a cringe GIF, GIF.
Here's how I think the only way this is going to remain civil is I think
I am in a civil mood.
I'm very in a civil mood too. So like, do you want to go first? Do you want me to go first?
I don't believe either of you.
Do you want to go first? Or do you want me to go first?
I don't care.
Because I say what we just you present your points, I present my points, we move on. This podcast has been on a while. You're probably gonna have to get heated over this tomorrow night.
If I feel it get too heated, I'll mute you.
There we go. We give Connor muting power. Connor, you're the moderator.
I don't know. I'm just saying.
I give Connor muting
If we
power.
agree to just shut up while each other talk, then it
well, no,
won't
because
get
I
it.
want to discuss it.
I don't know that I want
Well, let's
to.
agree. Let's
I'll
agree to
just
shut
feel
up
it
while
out.
each other talk.
I'll just feel the emotions, and if it's
I don't think I'm going to
toxic,
discuss it very long.
Let's just agree that we're not going to interrupt. We're not going to get heated. We're just
Okay.
going to present our points and present counterpoints if necessary.
I don't think I even care to present a counterpoint.
Okay.
If it starts to become toxic,
So
then
you want me to go first?
I'll control it.
Go ahead. Yeah, you
Okay.
go first.
So here's my thing.
I might have to put earplugs in.
No, so
This guy's so stupid.
we just said we weren't going to interrupt.
Don't worry, I
No,
muted him.
no. Here's the thing. I don't think that it happening every once in a while is a big problem. I think that this is personally, I think it's a waste of time to talk about and debate it like we're about to do. Because this in moderation wouldn't be that bad, and in specific situations wouldn't be that bad. When it happens in excess, just like anything in commentary, is when it gets annoying. I think if it happened every once in a while, it would have never got brought up. But like, so if it's just, this is my 2 points. If it's to decide a tournament, like if it's Paul has a putt to beat Ricky, the commentator absolutely should not be rooting for that putt to go in. Okay? Mm-hmm. If it's in the middle of a round and Ricky threw an upshot and it hits the front cage and it is rolling towards OB, I have no problem being like, oh, sit down. Because that's our natural tendency anyways as a fan. So I think if it's like an inconsequential middle of the round, something's happening, not a big deal. That's just a nature's reaction, whatever. If it's a big moment of like, this is the tournament, this is going to decide it, then yeah, you obviously shouldn't be rooting for one because then you're rooting against the other in that moment.
Okay.
I presented my point.
Okay. So here's my
Idiot. I'm just kidding.
my point is, I just don't think it should. First of all, let me explain what we're talking about. We're like, more specifically, we're talking about why the disc is like still in the air,
I'm still moving.
Commentators, like Doss or Ian or whoever, have this habit of talking to the disc because
They're rooting for something to happen.
they're rooting for something to happen. Usually a good result. Well, always a good result.
Well, yeah, true. They're never like, "Hit that tree."
Like,
Get out of
they're
bounds
usually
now.
saying something like "get off that tree" or "oh, sit down," like "don't go out," or "get in" on a putt. Now, I understand that this habit comes from the fact that these guys play disc golf, and if I'm on a card with card mates, I do the same thing to their disc.
Yeah.
However, sports commentary is an art. Okay, like it is like, it's not like some like, it's somewhat subjective as in people have different styles, but the idea of sports commentary is pretty much the same around every sport. You are meant to add to that sport, but you're meant to remain completely unbiased. And while you can kind of root on the moment and root on the spirit of the sport, you are meant to add to the moment after it has taken place. Or even if something's building, you're not meant to root for a certain result. Like that's like literally the number one rule of sports commentary is you don't root for a certain result to happen. It's like the rule. So, because if you're rooting for a putt and if it goes up in there and you say get in, you're actively rooting against everybody else in the field in that moment. You're cheering on that particular player, which means you're cheering against everybody else. Now, when that putt goes in, you may hear sports commentators say how awesome that was and like that was a great putt. But he's just saying that was a great putt. He's not saying, I'm so happy that putt went in for Ricky because I'm cheering for Ricky, for example. So my point is, I just think that bias should be completely separated from commentary, completely, because that's just how sports commentary works. This is not a new concept. That's all I'm saying. And I have no more counterpoints. That's all I'm saying. I think our points have been laid out. Like I said, Brodie is most definitely going to chew you out on the debate podcast. You're going to have to deal with that. So I don't think you should have to deal with me
Well,
today.
I want to ask you a question. I want to ask you.
Okay.
Well, it's a two-part.
Okay.
First thing, you might have heard this. I haven't heard this.
Okay.
When have you heard a commentator in disc golf say get into a putt when it's in midair?
I think that's what Brodie was specifically tweeting about. I think he heard it from an example.
I have never heard that. I've heard get off that tree, sit down.
Same thing in my opinion.
To me, that's where I think the biggest thing is. I feel like those are two completely different things. Because I feel like in disc golf, you're playing against the field and you're playing against the course. And when something unfortunate happens, they're rooting for that player against the course. But when you're rooting for a putt to go in, you're rooting for that player specifically against the player. Because in like a team sport, right? The only thing you're playing, if you're Duke and UNC, they're only playing each other. There's no middle ground.
Right.
So if Seth Curry shoots a shot and Jay Billis goes, get in, he is actively rooting against UNC.
Yeah.
If, again, we'll go back to a Ricky hits the cage and it's rolling towards OB and they're saying, sit down. They're not actively rooting against another player. They're actively rooting for Ricky's bad break to not be as bad.
They're rooting for Ricky to not have it cost him a stroke, which helps him against the field. Like we have
indirectly, but
we have golf commentary. We have years and years of golf commentary as a precedent for how golf commentary should work.
I haven't listened to it enough to know if there's ever a moment where there's too much backspin and it's rolling off the green. They're like, oh, don't do it. They don't say it. I don't have enough proof.
They might say, oh, and it looks like this is going to catch the front edge of that green and it's probably going to roll down the green. Like they remain completely unbiased. And here's the thing. The most beloved sports commentators, a lot of the times, are the golf ones. They're the ones that end up being the most beloved. Jim Nantz is like the legend of commentary, a lot for his golf commentary work, because he is so unbiased and he's perfect at it.
I will also agree with you on, I have heard Ian at times be like, you know what? I'm so happy for Ricky, dude. He's what a great guy. Like, I'm so like, or yeah, it's great to see Matty O doing so well. Like that way of like rooting specifically for a player. I agree with you there. Rooting specifically for a player to win or being like, dude, I'm so happy this guy won. Because that feels weird to me.
Here's an interesting.
But when something's happening and it's like what I've typically heard is a bad break has already happened or a bad break is about to happen. And you're like, right. No. Like that's your reaction. Like, no, don't. I don't feel like that is specifically rooting for that player to do good. I feel like that's rooting for the result of the shot to end up okay. And I feel like that's the same as being like, that was a good break. To me, those feel like the same tone of like, don't let that bad break happen and be like, oh, wow, that was a good break.
I just want to add one more thing. One thing to remember is that these commentators work for a network. So like that's their job, is to appeal to the people watching that network. So if a commentator starts showing bias, you're going to turn viewers away from that network because they might not like that player. So that's where a lot of the danger comes in when you show bias. That's why any example of bias in professional sports commentary comes from local networks that are like literally like, welcome to University of Texas TV. Like we're showing the Texas football game. Like, yeah, those guys are going to show bias because they're being paid by that team. It's a local network. But on NBC, you're not going to see bias because they know that if they start showing bias towards any player or any team or anything like that, they're going to turn away viewers. It's a business. You got to appeal to everybody.
Do you mind if I say one thing towards this?
Go for it.
Welcome to Connor's soft takes, where I know how to sit on a fence.
Are you sure you're ready?
Sorry, I was getting a phone call. You guys are always talking about basically how like the commentator's job is to kind of facilitate the fact that there's like a storyline happening, or that's what they're trying to show on coverage. And like that's another reason why they would like talk really softly whenever somebody's putting, because they're like building the tension of like that's what's happening on the course, and they're just being a part of that. They're matching the emotion of what's happening on the course.
Yeah.
And so, how would you find a way to show that emotion and show the energy of what's happening on the course, but not root for or against something?
So
like, is there a line between rooting for just cool golf to happen?
So that's a really good point. So this is where the difference in, like in my example, is golf commentary versus disc golf commentary. This is where how you build to the moment. There's like a lot of famous calls where it's not necessarily the things they're saying, but like you mentioned, the quiet voice, it's the tone. So like in the Tiger Woods, or like let's say a golfer hits a shot, an important shot in a big event, and it's heading towards the pin. You might have a commentator. Like a lot of times they'll have like guys that are greenside and have a better view of things happening down on that hole. And you might have David Faherty down there and he goes, and guys, this one is headed right towards the pin. He did not root for anybody. He just told you it's headed right towards the pin. And he said it in an excited voice because he's excited about the moment. And you hear that and you're like, oh my gosh, I'm getting chills right now. It's going right towards the pin. Like would
his tone not be him rooting for that player?
No, he is just matching the moment, but he's not rooting for the player. He's just describing what's happening. That's all it is. He's not saying like, because guess what? If that same shot that's really good hits the flag stick and bounces 100 feet away, he's not going to say, "Oh
then
man,
he would be
I feel so
disappointed.
bad for him."
He'd be like,
what
it's
is he
right
saying?
off of
What's he
it.
saying in that moment? I'm not trying to argue. I'm just curious. Like,
What if it like hits the flag in that moment? He's
what's an example
going to
of-
say that it was a tough break, but he's not going to say anything related to like that's a shame for that player.
But
or
what I'm
anything
saying
like
is, would
that.
his tone be disappointed when he's saying it's a tough break?
I don't really know, but I think that's beside the point.
is it bad to say that's a shame for that player? Because you're not being biased. It is a shame for that player. You're not saying I'm happy or upset about that, but wow, that rolling OB, that's a shame for that player.
I think it's better to say like that's a bad break, because that's more of an objective statement than saying like you gotta draw the line between you're describing what happened and you're taking a stance on I am feeling like sharing feeling with that player, like I am like basically showing that I'm caring after that player. You got
Here's
to
my thing.
Paul threw just barely off the fairway, and he got an unfortunate.
Yeah, I got an unfortunate break, because that's the other thing is these commentators, if they're being perfectly unbiased, they have no stake in the event about who wins. So they need to show that to the people.
I have never heard a disc golf commentator show stake in the event as to who's winning and who's not winning, ever.
Okay, but if a guy says get in when a putt's in the air, clearly he's rooting for
That's
that guy.
the thing I haven't heard either. That Brodie might have heard it.
If a
I
guy
don't know
is
if you've
okay,
heard
if a
it.
guy is cheering get off that tree to a
See,
disc,
that's where we disagree.
He wants him to do well. Clearly, he's showing bias.
But the guy had already messed up, and he's rooting it for it to not be that bad.
And I think
Right,
I think
he's showing bias towards that situation. It's all my argument is, don't show bias.
My argument is there's about 15 things that we could put energy towards to improve the commentary before we get to this one.
I don't like that argument at all, because I don't think you should.
I think it's a
ignore-
waste of breath.
I think it's an easy thing to squash out, though. It's very easy.
But
Just say,
I don't think-
don't do that. All you gotta do is walk up to Nate Dawes next morning. Hey, make sure we don't say anything while the disc is still moving that would show bias, and then it's gone, and now we can move on to the other 15 things. It's not a waste of breath. It takes 10 seconds.
But I don't think anyone's not watching it simply because they're saying, sit down, sit down, sit down.
I don't
I
think-
think that has the same
I don't
energy as
think
like,
it's a-
oh no, it's rolling, it's rolling.
I don't think
that feels the same to me.
I don't think it's a wise argument to say we should not fix things just because it's not a huge issue.
But see, I don't think that's an issue really.
Okay, so you're saying it's a non-issue.
I think that
Make
if
sure
they're,
that's
if they're
your
actually
stance,
saying
though.
get in, if they're using it too much, then it's an issue. Yes, which I think right now it's an issue because they're using it too much.
Okay.
That's the issue to me. Not what they're saying, but how often they're saying it.